Reconvening the open session, and in closed session, the board discussed and took action on the following legal matters: Napa Valley Unified School District versus California State Board of Education, California School Boards Association's Education Legal Alliance versus California State Board of Education. Item 17 is the next item on the agenda. It is the action to set aside the State Board of Education's September 15th, 2022 reversal of the denials of the Mayacamas Charter Middle School petition to comply with a writ of mandate to be issued by the Sacramento Superior Court in Napa Valley Unified School District versus California State Board of Education, and California School Boards Association's Education Legal Alliance versus California State Board of Education. As of this morning, no judgment or writ has issued. The board has received a request from counsel for Mayacamas Charter Middle School to withdraw item 17 because the school intends to immediately appeal the judgment and writ to be entered by the court in both cases. Counsel for the school has represented that its filing of the notice of appeal will automatically stay the court's judgment and writ that would require the board to take certain actions within 30 days of the writ's issuance. Yesterday, the school filed notices of appeal in both cases. In light of these developments, the board will not take up item 17 at this meeting, and it will be withdrawn from the agenda. Moving on to the next item, which is the waiver consent calendar. We need the public comment slide up for the waivers. Thank you. There we go. Now I'd like to take up the waiver consent items W1 through W14. We'll now open the phone line for the public comment queue, and we will give a little wait time. First, we'll ask if there are any in-person public comment.
Nobody has signed up for public comment.
Okay. And are there any speakers signed up to provide public comment?
We do have a few callers in the queue. I'm going to remind the callers that we are currently taking public comment up for items W1 through W14. And I will open the phone line now. Caller with the last four digits, 8331. You are now live. Please start your public comment. Okay, hearing none. Caller with the last four digits, 2181. You are now live. Please start your public comment. Caller with the last four digits, 2181. You are now live. Please start your public comment.
My name.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kathy Matthews. I'm a grandmother with a grandchild who I will be sending to Mayacamas in several years. I support this school. The two existing middle schools are totally overcrowded.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That item has been withdrawn.
Yes.
We are currently taking public comment up for W1 through W14. And it looks like that concludes public comment.
All right. Given that there's no further public comment, I'll ask for a motion on consent items waivers 1 through 14. Do I have a motion? Member Rodriguez, do I have a second? Member Olken, thank you very much. Show of hands for those in favor. Please keep your hands up till they're counted. And for UDL purposes, we'll say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Item 12 is the California's Bipartisan Safer Communities Act Stronger Connections Grant Program proposal, the approval of the criteria to define high needs. And I will turn this over to Lisa Borrego of the CDE. Lisa, please begin.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, we can.
Good morning, everyone.
It is a little low, however.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Board President Darling Hammond, Vice President Glover Woods, board members, and Chief Deputy Nicely. My name is Lisa Borrego, Director of the Whole Child Division. I will be presenting on board item number 12, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act Stronger Connections Grant Program. Here with me today are Nancy Kim Portillo, Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, and Dr. Tom Herman, Education Administrator of the School Health and Safety Office. Tom's office will be responsible for administering the Stronger Connections grant for the California Department of Education. The California Department of Education recommends that the SBE approve the criteria for the definition of high-need LEA as required in the Californians Bipartisan Safer Communities Act Stronger Connections Grant Program, pending the SBE Executive Director approval of final revisions requested by the SBE, correction of any typographical errors, and necessary non-substantive clarifying edits. President Biden signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act in June 2022 to address the epidemic of gun violence in schools and communities. Congress authorized $1 billion in formula funding under Title IV, Part A of the Elementary and Secondary Act for state educational agencies to provide safer and healthier learning environments for students. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act provides $1 billion to be awarded in competitive grants to high-need LEAs to establish safer and healthier learning environments. This is called the Stronger Connections Grant Program. The Bipartisan Safer Community Act specifies that state education agencies must make competitive grants to high-need LEAs to support activities under Section 4108 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. California was awarded $119 million. $113 million of this grant will be awarded to LEAs through a competitive process. The purpose of the grant is to increase school safety, address mental health needs of students, and promote the emotional and physical well-being of all students. States are encouraged to award funding to LEAs that prioritize social-emotional learning programs and practices, trauma-informed practices, identification and referral, initiatives that reduce exclusionary discipline approaches such as restorative practices, systemic efforts to transform school climate by reducing punitive school discipline practices and increasing support for pro-social behaviors. LEAs will outline their planned use of funds in the request for application. Under the U.S. Department of Education published guidance, the state education agency must define high-need LEA for purposes of eligibility for the Stronger Connections Grant Program, and is encouraged to provide the public with an opportunity to comment and provide input related to the grant implementation. Further, they encourage states to use a measure of poverty in their definition of high-need LEA and to consider other elements such as chronic absenteeism, exclusionary discipline, referrals to the juvenile justice system, substance use, lack of mental health staff, and exposure to natural disaster. The charge is to identify a definition of high needs that is reflective of an LEA's lack of resources to address the health and safety of all students. This definition is not intended to identify the LEAs with the greatest safety issues. To be clear, as we submit this proposed definition of high needs, we do not assume that a lack of resources means a community is more violent. Rather, our purpose in proposing this definition is to increase equity in resources through this grant in combination with other recent efforts like the Community Schools Partnership Program to strengthen assets and add resources in areas where decades of disinvestment has had deep educational impacts. To meet the requirement to provide the public with notice and a reasonable opportunity to comment, and to maximize input from education partners across the state, the CDE designed and distributed a survey. The survey asked respondents to rank the importance of the proposed elements of high need and to prioritize strategies and approaches to safety and student outcomes. The survey was sent electronically on June 6, 2023, and closed on June 12, 2023. The survey was sent to educational partner groups, including but not limited to state and federal program directors, school safety partners from all counties, school districts, mental health partners, and service providers. CDE received 343 responses. 77% of respondents indicated that a chronic absenteeism rate higher than the state average was of high importance to defining high need. 82% of the respondents indicated that adding or increasing staff within an LEA whose primary purpose is to address the mental health needs of students is a priority strategy and approach to improving student outcomes. In formulating the definition of high need, we considered several factors, including available statewide and comparable data, survey results as referenced in slide 10, definitions used by other states, and the proposed request for application components. For example, while a criterion on access to mental health staff was of interest, California does not have a statewide comparable metric to measure this, which makes it more appropriate for discussion by the applicant in their request for application. As mentioned, we also looked into definitions used by other states. Nevada used a high rate of poverty and one of the following characteristics: high rates of chronic absenteeism, students experiencing transiency or homelessness, referrals to the juvenile justice system. Colorado used the percentage of students eligible for free and reduced lunch, student to mental health ratios, and rate of chronic absenteeism. Finally, the request for application will allow us to capture additional local data that will help determine the allocation of these funds. As a result, the following represents the proposed definition of high need for your consideration. LEAs with a concentration of 80% or above of students from low-income families, English learners, and students in foster care, plus one or more of the following characteristics: unduplicated pupil count, a chronic absenteeism rate higher than the state average, an exclusionary discipline in and out of school suspension rate higher than the state average, a school stability rate lower than the state average, and a dropout rate higher than the state average. With the combination of the use of a high unduplicated pupil percentage and one of the additional eligibility criteria, such as high suspension rates and the local context provided in the request for application, we hope to provide a significant amount of funding to LEAs who want to improve their school climate for a safer campus, who may not otherwise have access to resources to do so. For clarification purposes, I do want to mention that unlike community schools implementation grants, eligibility for this grant is at the LEA level rather than at the school level. In other words, LEAs that qualify under the high needs definition approved by the board would determine which of their schools they will seek funding for in their request for application. We anticipate providing further guidance and clarification for the school site selection process as we finalize the request for application in collaboration with SBE. Based on the proposed definition of high needs, CDE conducted a data run to determine the number of LEAs that would be eligible, along with some additional highlights. 624 LEAs would be eligible under the proposed definition of high need. Within those LEAs, 3,228 schools under eligible LEAs, including charter and non-charter schools, would be eligible. In addition, eligible LEAs are distributed throughout the state, representing diverse geographic regions and both urban and rural communities. The competitive application process will encourage eligible LEAs to utilize specific local data points or indicators such as mental health needs, bullying, harassment, community and school violence, and substance use to establish the gaps and needs that will be addressed through this grant program. The competitive process will allow LEAs to provide information about their specific health and safety needs. The draft request for application that was included at the time of the agenda posting for the July meeting does not reflect a new requirement of the 2023 Budget Act, which requires that LEAs implementing MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, be prioritized for these grants. The multi-tiered system of support prioritization will be included in the final request for application, along with directions of how LEAs can document their multi-tiered system of support process as part of their submission. CDE, in collaboration with SBE, will use the request for application process to ensure that schools and communities demonstrating the highest need are prioritized and that requests for application submission requirements mitigate against potential disproportionate advantages or disadvantages for particular LEAs resulting from the federal requirement to qualify applicants at the LEA level. CDE will work closely with SBE staff to ensure alignment and integration of this new language, along with developing, subject to approval by the Executive Director of the State Board of Education, the request for application process. Additionally, we have heard from educational partners about the timeline in the posted draft request for application and will adjust the submission timeline to ensure that all eligible LEAs have the opportunity to apply. Eligible LEAs will apply on behalf of their selected schools. As mentioned previously, unlike community schools, eligibility for this grant is determined at the LEA level rather than at the school level. LEAs will receive between $150,000 to $400,000 for each selected school. Allocation is based on school enrollment. The amounts are designed to give schools enough resources to effect change. The funding will be allocated to awarded LEAs annually for 2 years. All grant funds need to be expended by September 2026. In closing, the California Department of Education recommends that the SBE approve the criteria for the definition of high-need LEA as required in the California's Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, Stronger Connections Grant Program, pending the SBE Executive Director approval of final revisions requested by the SBE, correction of any typographical errors, and necessary non-substantive clarifying edits. This concludes our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Very much. First, I want to ask our liaison. Well, first, I want to ask you to put the public comment slide up, which you have. Members of the public wishing to provide comment may do so in person or by calling the telephone number and using the access code provided on the slide that is shown now. And while we're waiting for members of the public to call in, I want to ask our liaison, Member Escobedo, if he has any initial comments. Then we'll see if we have clarifying questions on the board before we go to public comment. Member Escobedo.
I just wanted to note that I do believe that the indicators we saw in front of us, unduplicated counts and high chronic absenteeism and free and reduced lunch, are indicators that I do believe helps us identify which schools are worthy for safer community grant. However, I just want to also share that, you know, just because we have a high rate of chronic absenteeism or we have high poverty, you know, safety is an important aspect for all schools, no matter what the poverty rate. In fact, a lot of the violence occurs in schools where, you know, you have very affluent population. Most of the shootings actually occur in non-urban school settings. So just wanted to share that. But looking at the requirements as we see in this grant, you know, I do applaud CDE for their efforts in creating the criteria, but I just want to make sure that, you know, safety, you know, belongs for every school, no matter what these indicators look like, right? So just wanted to share those thoughts from my perspective. Thank you.
Are there any clarifying questions before we go to public comment? Yes, Member Patillo-Bronson.
So as you were describing the potential criteria, I think that you said something about not using community level violence as a indicator based on federal guidance, but I just wanted to clarify.
So the recommendation that's being put forth to the SBE takes into consideration 3 indicators, not of one of which is community violence, that indicator or that local information can become a part of the applicant's RFA in describing the communities and the schools that they'll be applying for. So they can use that local level data to be able to share and present their story on why they're recommending their school site to be funded through this program.
There's not a federal prohibition on actually using that for our eligibility or criteria for the RFA. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask, excuse me, I'm asking my technical assistant to support. Dr. Herman?
Thank you. Tom Herman, Administrator of the School Health and Safety Office. That is correct, that there is no prohibition against using the community violence indicators. It's just that we felt it would be fair to use those indicators that are collected statewide. And then those other local indicators, such as substance abuse, community violence, youth risk behaviors in schools, that they would form part of the RFA to become part of that competitive process. Stay with me.
Just a brief one. I thought you might have said, but I didn't hear quite clearly. Did you say that you were going to adjust the RFA timeline to allow all LEAs to apply?
That is correct.
Do we know what that timeline is yet?
No, we'll be working with the SB staff to identify what that timeline will look like.
Thank you.
Member Olkin, did you have the same question? It looked like you had a question too. Okay. All right, we are clear, so we're going to go to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room? And you guys could take a rest if you want for a minute, because I don't know if we'll have any public comment. Don't get too comfy.
There's no public comment in the room.
All right, is there any on the phone?
Yes, we have one caller.
Okay.
Caller with the last four digits, 4270. You are now live. Please start your public comment.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Excuse me, Madam President and members. Leangela Reed on behalf of the Small School Districts Association. I want to thank the department for acknowledging the timeline, which was a little bit untenable for everyone, but particularly small districts who don't often have the capacity to do a grant in the timeline such as was proposed. And we look forward to working with the department to ensure that that small districts can play a part, because those community services are even more overstressed in some of those rural areas. So we look forward to working with you, and thank you again for adjusting the timeline, and we are here to help in any way we can.
Thank you. That concludes public comment for item number 12.
Thank you. So we're now open for board discussion. Questions or comments? Yes, Member Patillo Bronson, and then Member Orozco Gonzalez.
So I just wanted to start by saying I think this is such a necessary and important area of focus, and I'm so grateful that you all have put this together to actually think about how to make sure that these funding sources are directed to the right places. I'm a little, I'm trying to grapple with the lack of a community violence indicator, which I think would hit it most on the nose. And in prior work, there are state-led indicators that are collected around community levels of gun violence by zip code. I'm going to pull up the stat as soon as my phone opens up. It used to be the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development that has been renamed in the 22 budget as the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. And they have a statewide database of firearm-related hospitalizations. The level of community violence, particularly that young people experience in high violence community, I think should be lifted up. And it's not, I think, quite the same as thinking about community level poverty, which I think is important, valuable, and certainly relevant. But because we have particular school sites and LEAs where the levels of PTSD rival that of war zones, I think it is relevant to actually have an indicator that captures that information. So my suggestion would be that that be elevated as among the definitions of high need as we're thinking about a pot of funding that is about community level violence and safety. And I'd be happy to send you the sort of data sources, but it's a state agency, so.
Member Orozco Gonzalez?
Well, and make sure I could hear. In considering that the funded activities may involve providing mental health services, encouraging community involvement, establishing programs to prevent students from dropping out, implementing anti-bullying initiatives, purchasing security equipment, reducing chronic absenteeism in elementary schools, providing early intervention for middle school students, behavioral, mental health challenges. When I was reading all this, I thought about, will LEAs be encouraged to create synergy with community school grants that have been awarded? Because it seems like it would be something that goes together. The question again is, will LEAs be encouraged to create synergy with community schools grants that have been awarded?
Yes, thank you. We are building that into the RFA, that districts indicate the extent to which they're having systems in place that are school-wide, that include community involvement and other initiatives that they currently have related to this. This grant itself is related to Title IV, Part A of ESSA. It's separated fiscally, but it is nonetheless many of the same topics, and so related to the ones you just mentioned.
Great, thank you. And I'm also just add that I'm happy to hear that the timeline is being worked on, because I wanted to be able to give opportunities to LEAs to have enough time to apply, especially rural communities that don't have the resources for these grant writing teams. So thank you.
I'd just like to piggyback on that, and then I'll see if there are any other questions or comments. It would be great if in both, helping people think about that, we can also try to structure the reporting and so on so that it is more efficient for districts, because, they're getting hit with a lot of, management, monitoring, reporting things. And I know that this is federal, so that adds its own, wrinkle to it. But if you can keep that in mind as you're also helping people think about how to integrate the work that they're doing. The bill itself allows for a large range of fund uses, from sort of school hardening practices to, more supportive practices to create a stronger climate and mental health setting. And it might be useful in the RFA when you get to that to be either providing some of the research or asking districts to, locate their plans in the evidence about what is most supportive of school safety. So that...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments?
I don't know if I need to actually propose a motion in order to append something on gun-related hospitalizations as a factor.
Hospitalizations?
Gun-related.
Oh, gun-related, yeah.
Community violence, and I don't know.
Well, let's come back around to that. We have another discussion coming from Member McQuillan, and then we can come back to that question before we get to a motion.
Yes, thank you for bringing this forward. You mentioned a consideration on the timeline for the application for additional time for rural districts. Were there any other considerations for the disbursement and, equitable disbursement for rural districts also?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We've been in contact with rural districts, and part of the issue has been when it's based merely on ADA that they sort of suffer from that because they're not given enough funds to really affect systemic change. And so we're looking at a minimum threshold of 150,000 currently is our thinking about a school. So regardless of their size, that they would be given enough money to effect change that is long-lasting and systemic. As well, I should note that there would be a cap equally on larger districts, so that they would not sort of gobble up all of the funds, so that there would be a cap on the very large districts to allow us to be more equitable with the disbursement of the funds.
Member Olken?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question related to Member Petio Bronson's potential amendment. So I thought I heard when you were presenting that the reason there wasn't a specific indicator related to community violence was related to the fact there isn't a comparable measure statewide. And I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit, and then maybe I misheard that. And then also clarify if the description of community violence or community violence is built into the application but isn't an indicator, how would it actually be considered?
I'm sorry, could you repeat just the last?
Yeah, so if those who are applying are able to address and speak to the conditions of the community and, particularly related to violence, but it isn't a specific indicator in the application, how would it actually be considered when judging and trying to determine who would receive the funding?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. So it would be addressed in the RFA itself, in the rubric, in terms of evaluating the extent to which those LEAs applied for funds, the extent to which they're matching their proposed activities with what their needs are. And so if their needs are such that students are experiencing trauma and so forth associated with community violence, they would indicate that along with the local data that they're getting from that.
So it would be built into the rubric for assessment. We wouldn't be looking for a specific measure that they have to quote because there maybe isn't one across the entire state.
That's correct. As the current configuration of it, that they would not, that high need would be established through only those indicators that the CDE collects statewide. To be fair.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
I think at this point I want to come back to Member Petilo Bronson about the data, the indicator that you were talking about, so that we're all getting on the same page about that.
Yeah, so the California Department of Healthcare Access and Information tracks firearm-related hospitalizations, which I think is a particularly relevant measure of community violence, in part because it's available statewide. It's at the zip code level, so a school district could easily aggregate the data based on its zip codes and its attendance zones. But it also, I think, in some ways is a truer picture of a lack of community safety that kids experience in their lives. In my normal day job, I work on community violence initiatives, and the White House, for example, had just hosted a community violence forum and initially looked at firearms incidences relating in death. But obviously, when kids are shot, when people in a community are shot with regularity, that has an incredible impact on mental health, even if someone does not die. And so I think what's really helpful about the Department of Healthcare Access and Information's data on this topic is that it actually gives a fuller picture of gun violence that might be weighing on a kid's home environment, community environment. And I'd be happy to send the website links.
And are you thinking to propose that should be one of the criteria for eligibility?
So I think it's a two-part. If on slide 12, I think basically the LCFF factors are kind of the first function. And then there's a list of additional characteristics around chronic absenteeism, exclusionary discipline. And my proposal would be to add gun-related hospitalizations as a factor to be considered below that among the bullets.
So that's the amendment you would like to make to the high-need categories.
I think one thing we would just like to note, if I may, is we do not know enough about the data set and would be challenged to figure out the overlay of zip code and LEA boundaries in a short timeline. However, again, that information could be utilized in the development of their narrative associated with the schools that they would be selecting to be considered for the application. So it is just something we'd want to make note of.
I wonder, so there's criteria to apply, which is the front gate to get in. And I wonder whether schools that might be high need on this variable, which is the one that's most related to safety, might be excluded by the other criteria. Well, so one way to use this criterion is to say once you get in the door of these measures, then you can also speak to the gun-related hospitalization rate. But I mean, this is just a pondering. There may be schools that have very high gun-related hospitalization rates that would not be eligible based on these criteria.
But there are community, as to your point, there are communities that could choose to use that data information to help explain their narrative for that selection of schools, while also considering the other indicators that we're proposing in the definition.
These bullets below are not additive, right? They're not requiring in an application process that they have high rates of all of the bullets, right?
That's correct. That's correct. It's the concentration of 80% or above of students from low-income families, English learners, and students in foster care, plus one of the following. So it would be any of those indicated there.
And those would be determined by the state education data set. Right. So are you comfortable with the notion that the criterion, maybe I shouldn't use the word criterion, that the consideration of the gun-related hospitalization rate would come later as something that people could suggest?
So I think the current proposal already has that baked in as a later almost description that would be in the application. Part of why I'm pushing for it to be here is this is ostensibly a funding pot that's about community level violence. And I think it's important to have that lifted up. If a school district doesn't have ready access or has so many zip codes to pull that it feels onerous, they can certainly use any of these other criteria because there's already 4 that they could choose from. But I actually think that enabling a school district to share a more clear view of the levels of community violence that their students face is pretty important for a funding pot that's actually about community violence.
Thank you for your comment. I just would want to again make note that we are trying, as we think about what eligibility looks like for all LEAs within the state, we want to assure that they had access to available statewide and comparable data that would equalize their ability to be eligible for this grant. So those were factors that were considered when these recommendations for the definition of high needs was determined. And again, recognize that there were other local information that could be shared at the time in development of their narrative within the LEA application process, RFA application process, that would allow us to have a better understanding of what some of the nuances that you're describing might look like in communities.
Yes, Member Escobedo?
And Trustee Bronson, I have, similar feelings, but understanding that keeping the data consistent, and for it to fit federal guidelines, I believe. It's my understanding why these indicators were selected. Although I completely on the same wavelength at you that, we need to look at other local indicators, and obviously it could hopefully increase the level of awareness for those districts that are interested in applying for the grant, knowing full well that those specific indicators are really the gatekeepers for eligibility for this grant. So thank you for bringing that up. Really appreciate it.
I see Member Yashimoto Tari.
I just have a hard time hearing. There's an echo on the side. So could you just repeat the name of the source of the data that you were suggesting, Member Portillo Bronson, please?
It's the California Department of Healthcare Access and Information. It used to be the California, it had a prior name until 2022. It used to be the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, and they changed their name.
Is it not a official California government department?
No. It's a statewide department, and it's statewide data. So it's got the data runs for it's got it by zip code across the state.
I think what I'm hearing about the concern of our CDE colleagues is that that's not in what we would download generally from the state education database to determine who the eligible pool is, but I'm not also clear why a district couldn't bring that and say, here is our bullet in the criterion. We have more than 80% of what I think it's unduplicated count students, and we have a very high rate of gun-related hospitalizations, and here's the data, here's the link to the data, whatever. So I'm not clear whether this is an inconvenience or a fatal flaw to bring in another agency's data.
I asked the question because it is a california.gov URL, and I think at a higher, like 30,000 foot level, from a school site's perspective, I think agencies of the state can do a service to those of us working in different sectors to help integrate the data. So I'm hearing in this case that maybe these data aren't available by school district boundaries, they're only available by zip code as one of the barriers for us. But I think in the larger context, as we start thinking about integration of services and supports on behalf of schools, it's a larger ask to see if the Department of Education might be able to work with this department. And it may not be in time for this RFA, but to work with this department to see if there can be collaboration to get this kind of data in boundaries of our school districts and our LEAs.
Well, let the districts be the ones who bring it with the evidence that they've assembled. There are occasional districts that are not, that cut across partial zip codes, which is, what is a little bit messy. But there also are plenty of districts that might, qualify on this basis and, would be very clean. So I think we want to be sure that that's in the consideration, because these are interesting indicators, but they're not particularly tightly tied to community-related violence. And particularly with the chronic absenteeism indicator, which we talked about yesterday, you could be identifying places that had a lot of snow or a lot of flooding, but that's not something that is, necessarily connected to the need that they have for these resources. So.
Yeah, and I think those are great considerations. The issue I think at hand is that sort of coordinating that data might push out the timeline further in terms of establishing the eligibility, in terms of getting the grant implemented. I would want to suggest, too, that there is so much great local data that is very very related to the intent of the grant, and those are students' mental health needs, their perceptions of safety, their experience with trauma, their suicide ideation, their sorts of feelings of sadness and hopelessness and disconnected to their school. And we're seeing such strong data in this post-COVID as students have returned. And this grant addresses those issues, and those local needs can be established in their RFA along with the activities that they're suggesting to improve those outcomes.
Yes.
A clarifying question. Does the federal guidelines hold you to the 80% threshold for the unduplicated count? I'm just thinking about maybe real small rural districts that may have difficulty reaching that 80%, but may have one of those other factors present. So is that a strong hold?
No, that's not that is something that the CDE could determine. So they don't, it's not, the 80% isn't a strict thing from the Department of Education.
RFA to see if a district could apply if they're under the 80% threshold, a small rural district, and then it's just based on the application. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Did you hear me? Did you hear the question?
Yes. So the item in front of you today is actually to determine and approve the definition of Heine, which would include that the LEA that applies must be at 80% or above. So consideration, if your question is does the 80% have to be the threshold that the CD that we're recommending and SBE approves, that would be for discussion. That could be considered, but there is no federal guidance that mandates that it be 80%. It's our recommendation based on ensuring equity, looking at conducting data runs and determining that there would be access for our rural school communities to have eligibility under this criteria at the time of submission.
So the 522 that are listed there, they meet the 80% threshold.
That is
Yes.
correct. Under those numbers provided to you, they not only meet the 80% and or they meet one of these recommended criteria. So that ensures that those numbers are actual numbers that ensure that would be eligible LEAs who would be able to apply under this particular recommended definition of high need.
Thank you.
And I just sent you the website.
Who?
Actually, I sent it to Brooks.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I guess we're at a point where we've raised a lot of considerations, and we may need a motion. And I'm wondering if we should maybe make the motion around the recommendation with an encouragement to consider the ways in which this additional data could be incorporated so that they can really, kick the tires on that.
I appreciate that this is a real-time discussion we're having, and you guys have not had a chance to look at a sister agency's data. So I'd be happy to phrase it as a consideration of, and provided it meets sort of the metrics that you all need for statewide comparability, I think that would be great. Sorry, so I am
What are you doing?
moving for amendment to enable consideration of gun-related violence metrics that are available through state agency reporting. And there's a couple of sources actually that track it, so you can choose which one you like the best.
So you're moving an amendment before we get to the motion. So I think we would then need a second for the amendment, and then we can vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the motion. Is that right? Or you want to fold that in with the, I guess we should not fold it in with the motion. Let's just vote on the amendment. She could? You want to vote the recommendation with that amendment?
Okay, I will vote in favor of the recommendation, which generally I think is fantastic, and with the amendment for consideration of gun-related violence metrics to be included based on considerations of statewide data consistency.
As plausible. Or...
As plausible. Okay. Per your discretion, and I would love to hear back, actually.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we? All right. Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye and raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And with that, because we've done so much good work this morning, I'm going to give you a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish our business for the day. We have a very relaxed schedule today. Okay, welcome back. We're going to move ahead with item 13. Item 13 is a public hearing regarding the appeal from an action of the Santa Clara County Committee on School District Organization to disapprove a petition to transfer territory from the San Jose Unified School District to the Oak Grove Elementary School District and the Eastside Union High School District. And this item will be presented by Larry Shirey of the CDE. Nice to see you again, Larry. You may begin.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, Larry Shirey, School Facilities and Transportation Services Division. As you just heard, we have an appeal from the Santa Clara County territory transfer that was turned down by the county committee there. The transfer was to move 2 homes from San Jose Unified to Oak Grove Elementary and the Eastside Union High School District. At the time that they heard this locally, there was only 1 student involved. Currently, there are 2. And the students in question have never, ever attended San Jose Unified. They've always been attending Oak Grove Elementary School, or I think actually Evergreen Elementary School early on interdistrict transfers. So there are a couple of peripheral issues I'd like to address regarding this before we move into the actual consideration. One is that you may have read in the item that we're calling this uninhabited territory. That may seem a little odd since there are people living here, but uninhabited territory is a legal term. It's in the Education Code, the Government Code, Public Resources Code, and the purpose is just to identify very small areas and prevent absurd responses to them, like calling elections for 2 people. A county election for 2 people. For our purposes, it just means that the proposal gets started by an owner petition rather than a voter petition, a petition signed by 25% of the voters in the area. Secondly, as we discussed briefly yesterday, the department and your staff have been working diligently over the last 15 years to move reorganization items away from your responsibility. And the criterion for that are items that have state interest or don't have state interest. The most recent change we had was that the legislature has removed appeals of disapprovals of territory transfers from things that come to you. Basically, the legislature has stated that a disapproval of a territory transfer locally is not a state issue. Now, this appeal was filed before that legislation went into effect, so you've got to consider it despite the fact that the legislature has said it's not of interest to you. Petitioner reasons for the transfer. You can see the schools. The boundary line is the heavy dark line that runs right through the middle there, and the proposed transfer area is a little red triangle in the lower part of the screen, and the schools in question are identified, outlined in red with little schoolhouses. So the petitioner reason for transfer is San Jose Unified Schools are more distant. The schools in Oak Grove and Eastside Union High School are along the parents' daily commute routes. They work in that area. At least one of the parents work over in that area. And the residents believe they have a greater sense of community identity with Oak Grove Elementary and with the Eastside Union High School District. Now, at the risk of ruining the ending, we're going to recommend that you affirm the action of the county committee to disapprove this territory transfer. And I'll bring this recommendation up again later. All the affected school districts are pretty large districts. And if you look at district-wide comparisons based on racial, ethnic, and SES issues, there's not a whole lot of difference. Certainly there are some differences, but the districts look relatively similar when we look at these issues on a district-wide basis. We'll come back to school-wide comparisons a little later. You might recall from previous reorganization issues that there are nine minimum standards that a district reorganization have to meet before the county committee or the state board can consider whether or not to approve the reorganization. The county committee found that all 9 of those standards were substantially met. But again, these standards are not the criteria for approval of a territory transfer. Once the thresholds are determined to be met, the county committee needed to examine the issues and determine that, and find out whether or not there was a compelling reason to transfer this territory. In our review of the information, county committee discussed no compelling reason to approve. In fact, they did discuss, one thing they did discuss was that interdistrict transfer agreements, which the parents currently are using, are the more appropriate response to the issues that the homeowners have here. The county committee then disapproved the transfer. All 3 affected school districts opposed the transfer: San Jose Unified, Eastside High School District, Union High School District, and the Oak Grove Elementary School District. Primarily, they're concerned that these piecemeal transfers just aren't the way to deal with parental preferences. Boundary changes are not like flipping a switch. The boundaries change. A lot of work goes into a boundary change, and when you're doing that with just parental preferences for one school or one school district over the other, it doesn't make sense to use the territory transfer process. And again, the interdistrict attendance agreements, which the districts all give freely. San Jose Unified approves over 1,000 interdistrict transfers every year. The parents in this group have gotten transfers from the district approved every year. Oak Grove and Eastside state, hey, we're in declining enrollment. We're not going to turn students down. Basically, the only reason that they're going to turn down or disapprove interdistrict transfer agreement, according to what they say, is if there are some disciplinary issues with the students. And additionally, even though they don't think there are any real general issues or community-wide issues here, if there are, moving 2 homes doesn't address them. It just simply moves the boundary a couple of homes over. The appellants the petitioners had 2 primary reasons in their appeal. One is they were denied due process. They didn't feel that the county committee told them why they were disapproving the territory transfer. They didn't get a written response from the county committee regarding the reasons for the procedural issues such as that. And they didn't believe that the county committee members used facts to make their decisions, that they substituted personal opinions. Well, the education code identifies things that can be appealed. These procedural issues are not things that can be appealed. Regardless, we took a look at the concerns, and we find there's no basis even for these reasons. They weren't denied due process. County committee members, just like state board members, can approve or disapprove a reorganization for any reason. One thing that I'm sure you know is that the legislature, through the Constitution, is given responsibility for district boundaries in the state. They have turned that over to you and to the county committee. So anything that you do regarding district organization is a quasi-legislative proceeding. You don't have to really, basically you don't have to explain yourself. Okay, so again, I mentioned that the county committee found that all the minimum standards were met. We're not going to look at those because we agree that they've met. The petitioners aren't arguing that issue. The districts don't take any issue with those findings. So all we're going to say is we concur. with the findings of the county committee on the 35753 minimum standards. But again, that meeting those standards is not the reason that you use to approve a reorganization. The legislature has given us some intent. Local educational needs and concerns will serve as a basis for future reorganization of districts in each county. So we need to look at reasons beyond the 9 minimum standards to approve a territory transfer. To approve it, you need to reverse the local action to disapprove. And 2 of the reasons to reverse have been supplied by the petitioners. They believe they have a greater sense of community with the Oak Grove Elementary School District and the Eastside Union High School District. And commutes to schools in Oak Grove and Eastside are closer than our commutes to the schools in San Jose Unified. We'll look at those 2. We have a yellow boundary line between the district, a blue oval showing the 2 homes. Regarding community identity, we have a difficult time seeing how those 2 homes have a greater sense of community identity with the homes to the east of them compared to the homes to the west of them or across the street. It's just, for us, that's a non-issue. Commutes to schools. As you can see here, as you saw earlier, San Jose Unified Schools are more distant than Oak Grove and elementary schools. But I mentioned there at the bottom of the slide that the differences do not meet local standards for extreme hardship. And here's what I mean by that. Santa Clara County is kind of the center of territory transfers in the state of California. You've heard 76 territory transfer appeals since 1994. 28 of them, more than a third, have involved Santa Clara County. So they have a lot of experience with territory transfer issues. Almost every territory transfer proposal that comes forward to them addresses issues of schools being closer in the adjacent district. And that's true along almost any boundary you have. You go north from the transfer area up until where the boundary cuts over west, you're going to find homes in the Oak Grove and the Eastside Union High School District that are closer to San Jose Unified Schools than they are to Oak Grove and San Jose and Eastside Union High School Districts. That's the nature of boundaries. Whether it's a school district or a city, there's always going to be something on the other side of the boundary that's closer to you than what you have in your own city, your own district. So it's in response to that understanding and the sheer volume of territory transfers the county committee has dealt with, they came up with their own local standards for what constitutes a hardship for parents in terms of distance traveled. And these distances do not meet the local standards for hardship. So we don't see any reason to overturn the county committee's decision, but we do have a couple of concerns that support that decision to disapprove the territory transfer. And these are issues we bring up almost every time. The reorganization moves students into schools with higher socioeconomic status. And the reorganization could establish a precedent for future reorganizations. I mentioned earlier that district-wide, the districts don't look that different. But if you look at the actual schools that serve the area and that would serve the area, there is a big difference. This is very similar to what you dealt with last November when we had an Orange County transfer appeal. Just looking at the elementary school, the San Jose Unified Elementary School is 60% socioeconomically disadvantaged versus 11% at the Oak Grove Elementary School. 27% English language learners versus 15%. 58% eligibility for free and reduced price meals versus 11% or 10.5%. And those differences are constant throughout the school types and across the different socioeconomic indicators. So that's a concern. We always have that as a concern. A precedent for future transfers, this is not a real big issue, but whenever you're using the territory transfer process to address individual parental preferences, and you have, and that becomes kind of wide knowledge. If it becomes successful, then you do have the possibility that other individual families are going to use this process to get to the schools they want, especially when you have schools that you can transfer into that are of a higher socioeconomic status. So it's not a big issue, but it's still a concern that we deal with. Let's skip that one. I've already kind of touched on it. So finally, our findings. Again, all the minimum standards are met. County committee found no compelling reasons for approval while considering the fact that interdistrict attendance permits are a more appropriate response for the parents' issues, as the same opinion the school districts have. The appellants presented no valid reasons for their appeal. And the CDE, we do not find any reason or concern compelling enough to reverse the county committee disapproval of the transfer, but we do identify some reasons that we think support that decision of the county committee. And so we think the local disapproval should be allowed to stand. Again, our recommendation is that you affirm the action of the county committee to disapprove the proposal to transfer territory from the San Jose Unified School District to the Oak Grove Elementary School District and the Eastside Junior High School District. Be happy to take any clarifying questions if you have any. If not, I'll be here to answer other questions following the public hearing.
I think we're going to, at this point, open the public hearing at 10:55 a.m. And we will hear from the petitioners who are in favor of the territory transfer. They'll have 10 minutes to make their presentation. I understand they'll be presenting virtually. And after the presentation, we'll open up the phone line for public comment and also take public comment in the boardroom for those who were not part of either presentation. If the petitioners are queued up, you may begin. Do we have the petitioners? There we go.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Yes, perfect. Sorry, just for consideration, would you be bringing up the presentation I shared with Mr. Larry earlier? Would you be bringing that up?
I believe it's coming up right now.
Perfect. I just was trying to understand the process. Thank you.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and this opportunity to speak to you. We appreciate the process that has been put forward to enable this. Please let me preface this, that the contents are specific to our situation and needs. It's been over 3 years since this appeal was made, and lots has changed. This difficult and trying time was not easy for anyone. The sudden disruption of routine in the world of children resulted in anxiety for many children, including ours, something we're still trying to recover from. Our neighborhood relationships became stronger, and this became more evident as our eldest started attending Oak Grove School District on a transfer. These types of activities where, you have interaction of children, even though they've only met each other over screen time, or as they're walking by your neighbor, they're only possible when you live within the school community in which you reside. These activities have carried out and established long relationships with our neighbors and other members of the community. Could we go to slide 2, please? During the county meetings, we heard the school district officials mention that they want consistency and reliability. And just like the school district, we too are seeking consistency and reliability for our children. We're a block of 4 homes that have been separated into 2 separate districts. So we are 4 neighboring homes with a fence line that divides the school boundaries. The experiences of the children in the 2 homes from those on the other side of the fence are different simply because of where the fence line lies. This Oak Grove Eastside Union High School District has provided routine familiarity and a strong sense of community, belonging, and friendship that started during COVID and continue to flourish today. We request you, please, to allow this transfer so that we can continue to thrive with certainty. Next slide, please. Our request is about our families and doing what is right for our kids. It is difficult to explain and understand why a block of homes would be divided into two separate districts. By moving these two homes into Oak Grove and Eastside Union High School District, the current fence line boundary would move to where Colleen Drive intersects the Valley Glen Drive, uniting the four homes under the same school district. Next slide, please. This image is very similar to the one that was provided by Mr. Larry, just a little bit different in terms of the visuals. Is where our homes are located, and everything in blue is showing the physical locations of the three Oak Grove and Eastside Union High School District schools. Please note this isn't exaggerated. It looks, as you just saw from Mr. Larry, it looks almost identical to what he was presenting with the exception of the colors. Being able to attend a school in your neighborhood, in our neighborhood, has allowed us to have greater participation in school-related activities for the children as well as us as parents. We've learned so much more about the communities and the schools since actively attending within Oak Grove School District. We were hoping for a great school experience for the kids when we first filed for the territory transfer, but since actually being able to attend Oak Grove School District, the experience proved to be beyond what we had imagined. The positive and thriving environment would not be possible when attending the assigned schools of San Jose Unified School District. The closest school is further than the furthest of Oak Grove and Eastside Union High. That's requiring us to drive our children to and from school. There are no safe or commutable ways by which children could walk or bike to these schools. Not only are these schools not within our community, each of the assigned schools are located within three separate communities with no real connection with each other or the community in which we live in. The assigned middle school, as you can see on the bottom left of the slide, is a commute that requires travel over the hills into Almaden Valley. This is a commute that is completely removed from anywhere we go, anything we do. This is not a neighborhood that we even travel through or have gone through. The assigned high school, seen at the top of the slide, requires travel on major streets, and at one point would require children on bikes or walking to have to cross the freeway access road that's requiring us to drive our children daily to and from school. Prior to transferring into the Oak Grove School District, we were on a transfer, as Mr. Larry mentioned, into Evergreen School District. Again, another school outside the neighborhood in which we reside, which truly gave us an understanding of the stark difference in attending a school within your community versus a school completely isolated from the community in which you reside. When the safest and most reliable and healthiest solution is all within walking distance from within our neighborhood, why create uncertainty and inconsistencies? As mentioned previously by both within this presentation and by Mr. Larry, we are currently on intra-district transfers between San Jose Unified and Oak Grove. The children walk to and from school along with their peers and friends, and this experience has been, again, much more amazing than we could have imagined. The intra-district transfer is not a long-term solution for us. There is no certainty. The transfer criteria only identifies criteria for school ages K through 5. The transfer nor the criteria provide a solution or a path to finishing elementary school or anything beyond 5th grade. The only eligibility criteria that we meet today is that I am employed within the Oak Grove School District boundaries, and jobs are never guaranteed. What happens to the transfer criteria for future years or if my employment ends or changes? I'm on the next slide. I apologize. There we go. Sorry about that. The solution is unreliable. These transfers are annual application process with no guarantees of acceptance year over year. Yes, folks will mention that you're in, but there's no written assurance of parents. There's no 100% guarantee understood that it may be based on, the child and if they have any issues within school. But even having that in writing is not available. Children are, and the other unreliability on this is that by the time the school district notify you of approval, it's too late to sign up for after-school programs or care, as enrollment for that happens much earlier in the year versus when receipt of acceptance is provided. Children are also at a disadvantage when they're on an interdistrict school transfer for district-based programming. Preference is given, and first choice is given to those children who reside within the school district boundaries. So the resident children are provided the preference for first choice. Next slide, please. So we believe that the Santa Clara County Committee did not make the right decision, as it is difficult to understand how this could be rejected if the facts, including the recommendations of the county office, were considered. The committee did not, either in writing or verbally, provide any evidence or explanation or reasoning for the rejection. Upon leaving the meeting, we were confused and still don't understand what the grounds for rejection was or were. What we recall of the discussion among the committee members was their personal experience of school-aged children. It was not apparent how the decision took into consideration the uniqueness of this boundary and or the findings of the county itself. The Santa Clara County office clearly demonstrated or concluded that all the criteria, as Mr. Larry mentioned, was met, that the number of school-aged children who could live in these two homes would not significantly impact enrollment at the districts. The declining enrollment in both Oak Grove and Eastside Union within the transfer bar demonstrates no negative impact. And as parents involved in the school site council, declining enrollment has been an ongoing discussion. And the corner of Colleen Drive and Valley Glen Drive.
Sorry to interrupt, your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. At this point, do want to open up the phone line for public comment. Sure.
Holding the transfers, and we know they're not going to be here, but I would like to just make a brief statement on the part of San Jose Unified. Okay. There is a San Jose Unified staff member available for questions, but the district superintendent has told me that the district really has no new information to present beyond what you've already heard. So unless they don't think that a repetition of arguments and information that's already been presented to you is appropriate use of time, so they're not going to be taking part in their part of the public hearing. Similarly, neither Oak Grove nor Eastside will be presenting.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we will open the phone line for public comment. We need the public comment slide. And we'll also take public comment in the boardroom for those who were not part of either presentation. And so let's see if there's anybody who wants to make public comment.
There is no public comment in the boardroom.
And is there any public comment on the phone?
There are no callers in the queue.
Okay.
Yes, hello.
We do have somebody.
Yes, actually, I'm the owner of the property 74. So, but I do not prepare the presentation because my neighbor Raman already prepared the presentation ready and represent me ready. But I would like to take a couple minutes to emphasize and my concerns.
I'm sorry, sir. You have already
Can you
used your
hear me?
10 minutes, so you do have 1 minute if you'd like to speak, but you only have 1 minute.
Okay. Hello?
Okay.
Is it me?
Go ahead and proceed.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would like to emphasize the current school district boundary. It's actually on my property, virtually plus my fence. So this boundary divided the small neighborhood, basically 4 houses to the 2 parties. It's not logical, no sense, for school district divided by the, ideally the physical street. So the community seems is broken. For example, the two house kids, play together, but went to the different school later on. That was not good. Also, current school are, far away from my homes, cross major basin, the basic street, even freeway. It has no safe for parents and for children with the basic traffic. But the Oka Grove School are all the walk distance.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up. Thank you.
right.
That concludes public comment for item number 13.
At this point, I want to close the public hearing at 11:10 a.m. And then we will begin board discussion. I'd first like to ask our liaison member Escobedo if he would like to make some initial comments.
I believe the presentation was very clear. We're looking at 2 homes, both the county and the district feels that
Can you stay close to your mic so we can hear?
there shouldn't be any changes to the boundaries. And then really, I think the presentation was very clear. Thank you so much for all the information you provided. Any thoughts or comments?
I think we're ready now for clarifying questions and board discussion. So, yes, Vice President Glover Woods.
Just a couple of questions in relation to the boundary itself. If I'm understanding the presentation correctly, this is a boundary that is not set by a street, but by a fence line. Is that correct, Mr. Sharp?
Well, correct. Let me just go back a moment here. Right, the boundary is there. You can't see it here, but the boundary, it runs is a property line. There, south of Colleen Drive, is a property line between 2 homes.
Okay. And can you tell me, do we happen to know when that district boundary was drawn? Was it drawn prior to the homes in that area and the homes in question, or was that boundary line drawn after those homes were existing?
I wouldn't know that specifically. My guess is, though, just by looking at the boundary line, since it's at the top there, it's running along the rear property line of homes on 2 streets on either side. It's the rear property line, and it's running along a parcel line that it's highly likely that the boundary was drawn after the homes were built, because otherwise parcels would be split and there just wouldn't be that clean distinction. But that's just without knowing for sure. That would be my guess.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Questions or comments? I guess I'd love to hear, since we haven't heard from the district or the county, the plaintiff asked the question, like, what is the reason that they wanted to deny the request? And there seemed to be lack of clarity about that. Maybe you could clear that up.
Do you want to speak with the district representative on that? Or I can answer.
Representing their views, yeah. That's
in terms of inter-district transfer request. I'm not quite sure I don't quite understand the concerns that were raised by the appellant in indicating that the process is not available after 5th grade. Inter-district transfers are for all grade levels, K through 12. I'm sure most of you know that. Regarding her concern that the transfer process for her is going to end at 5th grade, if she's got an employment-based interdistrict transfers, what we used to call the Allen bill transfers. Those are in statute. Once you get them, you don't have to reapply. So I'm not quite understanding what's going on there, and they're good until 12th grade. In the case of Oak Grove School District, they're not a 9-12 district, but they're good for the entire attendance of the students. In terms of, I think you were asking why about denials or disapprovals of transfers?
Well, no, about the idea of moving the territory boundary. That's what's being contended
I'm sorry,
here.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Why the, sorry? I know.
I have old ears, so I'm sorry.
The disapproval of the request to move the boundary, which appears to be, between, across a fence line in a small neighborhood. What the rationale was for that disapproval.
The rationale primarily was that there's no compelling reason to do it. That's all the conditions are met, and it's a responsibility of the county committee to find a reason to transfer the territory. They didn't find a reason. And really, the process can end there. There's no reason to do it. We're going to disapprove it. But they also indicated that, this is not the appropriate way to use territory transfers, that an interdistrict transfer process is the more appropriate way to deal with the individual preferences of the family and their desires for one school district over another. And
yes, Vice President Glover Woods?
I want you to finish your sentence.
I'm done.
Okay. I'm still having a little bit of difficulty, and I definitely appreciate the interdistrict transfer process for preference, most definitely. And I also appreciate the comments that were given by the person who was presenting in regards to some of the challenges with approvals of transfers and the timelines for some of the other things that you can avail yourself of. I want to try to get some clarification with where I'm struggling here. And to be very honest, it's the way the boundary line is drawn and how it's dividing the block. That is, I think this is where I'm a little bit challenged to understand why there's no compelling reason when we're dividing a block in this way, especially if that line was drawn after those houses were already there, if that is indeed the case.
Well, you really, I don't know if you can really see it clearly here, but the petitioners, the appellants, talked about 4 homes, 2 on, and I mean, we can't pull up their petition their presentation right now. 2 homes on one side of the boundary, 2 homes on the other side of the boundary. And then on the one side of the 2 homes, there's a cul-de-sac. On the other side of the other 2 homes is another cul-de-sac. And their issue is that we should. It's hard to describe without being able to show it to you, but it's going to divide the community no matter where the boundary is going to go. If you do what they want, it's still going to separate homes in that community from one district to another.
Talking about this?
Well, here it is. Yeah, here it is. So as you see here, 786, 784, 782, 780, the current boundaries in red divides those 4 homes. On the west side, 6204 and 6208 are homes on the Valley Glen Drive, which is a cul-de-sac. On the other side of 780 is another cul-de-sac, 2 homes. So everybody has fence lines there. If you move the boundary to where they want, which is the left green line, then they're still separating the community.
This is helpful.
It's still a fence line. I mean, it is. They're not. Their driveways aren't facing on the same street, but they're homes that are right next to them.
This helps to clarify my challenge.
Similarly, you're going to have homes right across the street that look onto these homes. So it's just kind of, in terms of a community identity issue, we just don't quite understand it because you move the boundary and you still have the same issue.
Thank you. And
And I would like to add that this is commonplace. Sometimes these boundaries are created 50, 60, 70 years ago. And in my former district, I had, within a block, one or two districts adjoining. So this is not a rare occurrence. This does happen because these boundaries were set a long time before some of these homes or sometimes neighborhoods were established.
Yeah, I mean, there are many, many instances where boundary lines run right through homes. So, right through I mean, that's just it. The boundary lines are drawn, a housing development comes in.
If you get the bedroom on one side, you go to one district, and you get the other bedroom. Leave it alone. All right, do we have any other questions or comments before we take a motion? I'm not seeing any questions or comments. Did I miss anything? All right. So do we have a motion? Member Escobedo?
I would like to motion for us to affirm the decision of the county committee to disapprove the proposal to transfer territory from San Jose to Oak Grove and the East Side, UHSD.
And I second that.
All right. Any further discussion of the motion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much. At this point, thank you, Larry. We appreciate you. And we'd like to reopen item 1 to take action on the preliminary report of actions draft May 2023 meeting minutes and to report on our liaison assignments. And while we're waiting for any members of the public to call in, we need the public comment slide up, please. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion from a board member to approve the May 2023 State Board of Education draft preliminary report of action meeting minutes? Member Olken, do I have a second? Member Rodriguez, thank you. Is there any public comment, either in person or on the phone?
There are no callers in the queue.
And no people in the room?
And there's nobody in the room.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, show of hands and say aye if you're in favor. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Member Patillo-Bronson and Member McQuillan will abstain. All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Now I want to invite our state board members to report out on their liaison activities that are not related to any items on our July agenda. And we're going to start with Member Escobedo.
I wish to remind the board, NASB conference will be on October 25th to 28th. It will be in San Diego, California. We had a actual meeting with SBE staff to talk about entertainment and speakers that can well represent California. We've also have a proposal submitted on our community schools, or we'll find out if it will be accepted by this month, and we'll be having a follow-up meeting within the next few weeks to discuss further plans to highlight California during this conference. If you haven't done it already, please register yourself. Again, October 25th through the 28th is the only conference designed specifically for state board members. Okay? My work as a liaison for West Ed, we are in preparation for the upcoming CEO hiring. Every board member, including myself, went through an extensive implicit bias training, and next week we'll be interviewing 3 finalists, and hopefully by the end of the month we will know who the new CEO for West Ed will be. And my colleagues, our President Darling Hammond and Trustee, Trustee, oh my God, Eileen. We had just a great time preparing for Senate confirmation as well. So
Loads of fun.
I think we did well. I think we did it exceedingly well. So it was truly an amazing experience, and just glad to be part of the process. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go to Vice President Glover Woods.
Thank you. Just to let you know, for the Instructional Quality Commission, that meeting, they did not meet since our May meeting, so there will be no report until our September meeting in regards to that commission. And as far as the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, also known as CCEE, have a couple of things to share with you. And again, the CCEE is quite busy in their work, even during these times when schools are off. Did want to share with you that the Direct Technical Assistance webpage now includes the progress updates for the May 2023 fourth quarter. And if you are interested, you can definitely go to that webpage and review the progress of the current districts that are receiving direct technical assistance. And to date, the districts that are receiving that direct technical assistance are Inglewood, Vallejo City, Salinas, Sacramento, Oakland, and Mount Diablo. Also, the CCEE has been helping to facilitate the high-quality online instructional materials, and the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, along with the CDE and CCEE, is nearing completion of the first year of that high-quality online instructional materials project, as well as the use of a rubric to help evaluate high-quality online materials for educators. There is also an annual report for the CCEE. If you would like to read it, I would definitely encourage you to do so. You will find that online on the CCEE webpage, and it was presented during our June CCEE Governing Board meeting, as well as an update from all of the centers. And again, in all of your free time, would encourage you to even take a look at that recording. There are a lot of great things happening at each of the centers. There's one other piece that I did want to share with you as I get ready to conclude. And I have to look on this, I apologize. As I'm getting this other information ready for you, I do want to let you know that the CCEE will be resuming in-person meetings. We've been meeting virtually, and our first meeting in person for the new year will be on August 31st. The last piece that I wanted to add in is to let you know that the CCEE just launched the Levers 2.0 LEA inventory. That's an expanded version of the basic Levers special education inventory for LEAs. And the tool is available online at the CCEE website. And it's really in place, and we encourage LEAs that are wanting to improve and align systems for general and special education to go online and take a look at that tool. Again, another helpful resource. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Very much. Member Lewis.
Okay, thank you. I am the liaison to the California Subject Matter Project Concurrence Committee, and I will give a brief report on the June quarterly meeting. And for those of you who are not aware of the individuals and groups that comprise this project, it consists of the California Arts Project, which is headquartered in CSU San Bernardino, the California Global Education Project, which is headquartered at the University of San Diego, the California History Social Science Project, headquartered at UC Davis, the California Mathematics Project at UCLA, the California Physical Education and Health Project at CSU Channel Islands, the California Reading and Literature Project at UC San Diego, the California Science Project at UC Riverside, the California World Language Project, headquartered at Stanford University, and the California Writing Project, headquartered at UC Santa Barbara. And these 9 disciplines, they work specific networks that consist of 80 regional sites that serve approximately 25,000 educators from more than 1,200 school districts on an annual basis. The CSMP is committed to growing their role in providing a more robust statewide support system led by the executive directors of each of the mentioned projects. And today I'll just share some of the highlights from the June meeting. The committee started off with an appreciation of the former California Reading and Literature Project Executive Director, Deborah Costa Hernandez, and welcomed the new Executive Director, Shervana Anderson Bird, who has been a regional CRLP Director for the past 13 years. The committee also provided a few highlights of several of the statewide cross-disciplinary initiatives that are now in different stages of implementation, and they include programming around ethnic studies and computer science. The CMP also continues to partner with the 21st CSLA Leadership Academy and has formed a new partnership with the California Initiative Collaborative, a statewide collaborative with intersegmental partners looking at recommendations to create various options for mathematics, articulation, and pathways to higher education. This is a very busy group, and during that meeting, each of the SMP leads provided updates on their current work. And if you'd like more information, you can visit the CSMP link to each of the projects with an explanation of the work that's going on. And thank you, and that concludes my report.
Member Olken.
Thank you. I am going to focus my comments today in the spirit of yay math after our successful adoption yesterday. So I'm just going to talk about my two liaison reports are sort of related to math. First, I am the liaison for environmental literacy, and I attended the quarterly accountability meeting of the Climate Change and Environmental Justice Program. This is a project which stems from a budget allocation of $6 million to create free open source curricular units at every grade level, focusing on climate change, environmental justice, and ensuring that kids at all levels are doing hands-on, action-oriented work to become better stewards and understanding the role that they can play. And it's being overseen by the San Mateo County Office of Education, and the work is being led by 10 strands. So the update is that the work to create all these units is moving smoothly. There are community partners across the state who are actually building the units, and they're getting ready to do sort of test implementations, pilot programs in schools. We got to see the design of the units, which is based on big questions. They are interdisciplinary, so this gets back to math, because all of the units have standards that come from different disciplines across the curricula. And so yesterday, the founder of 10 Strands was here talking about how the environmental literacy standards are incorporated into the new math framework, and that goes both directions. So that's really exciting work. And then the other thing is I was lucky to attend the Early Math Initiative Symposium, which is the Early Math Project is a statewide partnership that promotes the importance of math in early education, birth through age 8, by providing tools to parents and educators, and collaborates with agencies across the state to promote mathematical thinking and joy in math. The symposium was incredible. It was intended by 3,000 educators from across California, as well as a large national and international audience. And in case anybody here or out there listening missed it, they have another event coming up in the fall, which is a free virtual fall forum on October 8th. And so if that's something you're interested in, you want to look at the early math. Hold on, I even have the link. Well, you want to look at the Early Math Initiative website. And yesterday, we heard one of my favorite quotes from yesterday was, first of all, yay math. That was my first favorite quote. But my second one is that fun and rigor can coexist. And I think we don't always remember that in the math classroom, but they always remember that in the Early Math Initiative and the work that they do. And I think that's a really important piece of strengthening every child's excitement and how many kids are going to come and say, I love math. So, and with that, that concludes my report.
Theme for the meeting is yay math. Member Orozco Gonzalez.
Hi, everyone. So I am the Assessment Committee liaison, and I shared during our Item 3 discussion that the redesigned score reports for CASP and LPAC are a positive step towards improving test result reporting. The efforts made by the CDE and the ETS to involve students, educators, parents, and guardians in focus groups and feedback opportunities are commendable. The feedback received has resulted in a clearer, more accessible reports with less jargon, less text. The use of color and graphics will enhance visual appeal and understanding. I already received the reports early on in June for my own children, so I thought that already there is some step forward. The inclusion of school and state averages for scale score comparison and the consolidation of ELA and mathematics and science results into one report simplify the information and provide valuable context. The introduction of composite claim reporting for ELA and mathematics offers a comprehensive view of student performance. The commitment to continuous improvement and user-friendly designs is evident. And I want to highlight again that the educators will have access to over 200 assessment forms through the 23-24 Smarter Balance interim assessments for ELA and math starting August 1st, just in time for the school year to start our planning. The Tools for Teachers website provides instructional resources, including grade level performance descriptions and academic vocabulary lists to support educators in enhancing their teaching practices and meeting the diverse needs of their students. I say "our" because I'm in the classroom. These resources are aligned with the interim assessments, providing valuable guidance for instruction. Now, my recommendation is that it would be beneficial to include English language development, teacher resources in the Tools for Teachers website, and that the student score reports are available in multiple languages with further improved accessibility and inclusivity. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Member Porter.
So I'm just going to share a few highlights from my work. The first, that I was able to meet with the Youth Commission for the City of San Jose about opportunities for young people to get involved on not only the statewide level, but locally as well, and how to leverage their passions and turn them into passion projects and talents to make their school a better and more safe environment. Second, I was able to meet with the California Association of Student Councils, 3 different regional conferences, as well as their summer camp to share with young leaders about how to start their journey within school districts. And this is for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and just informing them about resources available to students as they continue their leadership journeys. And lastly, I've been able to train my successor, Anya, with meetings and by creating a Google Drive of information about organizations she should connect with, advisory groups to work with, people to connect with, and the best ways to maximize her time here on the state board. And so thank you again to each of you for the ways that you've impacted me indirectly and directly during my term. I know that I will come back to California because of people like you and just continue to live a life of service. So thank you. That concludes my report.
All right. Member Rodriguez.
Thank you. So we are currently, I'm the co-chair for the NASB's PEP, Public Education Policy Committee, and what our team is working on is high school redesign and rethinking how to make high schools more relevant and more engaging for our youth who report a disconnection at times with their high schools as they are. Sometimes they feel unprepared. And so we're rethinking and looking at models that are effective, such as when teachers have a chance to collaborate together, when schools are a little more intimate, closed for teachers to work with a small group of students. And what we're working on, we're looking at research and listening to experts, and then we'll be presenting this at the conference that Member Escobedo talked about in October. So it's exciting work, and it's important work for our young people and for our teachers as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Yoshimoto Tari.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I have two reports. One on
I passed by alphabetically. I passed by Member Petition Bronson.
Please.
Okay. I'm just looking at my alphabetical list, and it's like, go ahead. Member Yoshimoto Tari.
I was always last in elementary school.
I have a complex about that.
So good afternoon, everybody. Two brief reports, one on the Advisory Commission for Special Education. And I'm happy to report that the commissioners voted a new chair in, and Chair David Tostin, who many of you know, is eager to align the work of the Advisory Commission on Special Education with our work. And an example of that is they added a meeting in December to be able to advise us on the annual performance report that will come to us in January. So in time to give us that their advice. Secondly, the community schools effort. I just wanted to share that there was an inspiring community school summit on June 16th in San Francisco. There were thousands of educators there from across California and the nation. And I think what made it so phenomenal is that the breakout sessions were led by teachers, by parents, by community school coordinators, administrators, people from county offices. And it really showed the collaboration in the community school effort across the state and the country. So thank you.
And I'm going to go to Member Patillo Bronson, but I also, my alphabetical list did not include Member McQuillan, so I'm going to come back to you.
I think you're just keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
So one of the liaison assignments I have is with the Universal Pre-K Mixed Delivery Work Group, which focuses on both the expansion of transitional kindergarten as well as the expansion of the California State Preschool Program. It's exciting to see that UTK has been rolling out and is expected to serve about 300,000 four-year-olds by the 25-26 school year. What we're seeing is about 10% of school districts and charter schools are expanding faster than expected, enrolling four-year-olds even sooner than required by law, which I think is an exciting sign of interest and also capacity on the part of local implementing districts, and that about 80% of districts are offering full-day transitional kindergarten, even though they're not officially required to. But I think the research certainly demonstrates that that is a laudable aspiration to bring into implementation. In addition, the state budget, which I think we described somewhat earlier I guess it was just yesterday, also includes continuing eligibility expansions in terms of the number of birthdays that are included as we're rolling into or towards 25-26. And the budget also included funding to add one certificated or classified staff person to every TK class to reduce the adult to child ratios to align more closely with the state preschool program. It's also a cost of living adjustment, which has not always been the case, that the early side of the house has gotten the same COLA. And I think it's a huge sign of respect, honestly, to have that mirrored across the different systems. Latest breaking and connected to school districts, but somewhat sort of apart, is the child care side of the world, which really is the feeder system before kids come into the TK to 12 side of the house, received a huge, really largest pay increase in state history for child care providers. It's estimated to be about $600 million in rate increases over 2 years, plus starting the first ever $80 million retirement funding pot and $100 million for healthcare funding. Again, these are things that are normal in the world of K-12, but are new for the earliest side of early learning, and I think really exciting. The last is that, again, as distinct from the K-12 system, there are family fees that are charged for childcare. So there's a cap for the lowest income families to no longer have to pay higher amounts per month, but capping it at 1% of family income again. That is super exciting. In addition, for the liaison work on school facilities, there was a UC Berkeley Forum on school facilities and modernization and inequity problems in the modernization funding, which Jeff Vincent from UC Berkeley was the primary featured guest. Really drawing upon getting down to facts work from a couple years back around wide disparities in school facilities funding that are due to local property wealth and property values, and pointing out the degree to which it's effectively a regressive finance system that makes it very difficult for lower income districts and lower property districts to be able to access modernization funds. The big headline number that certainly caught my attention is that the most property poor districts have about $400 per student in terms of bonding capacity, versus wealthy districts or property wealthy districts have almost $800,000 per student. And the messages that are sent to kids when their facilities are allowed to fall into disrepair, I think, are significant. So there are a host of proposals being considered to look at changing the share of local contribution versus state contribution to take account for the fact that there are a lot of property poor areas of the state, and it really is not, it's not an urban rural, it's really across the state that that this problem has been percolating. But really looking at modifying the sliding scale proposal that is already actually baked into prior legislation to even the odds and make the system a little less regressive. And that concludes my report.
And Member McQuillan.
Thank you. My assignment that I want to report back on is the model curriculum liaison assignment. The first one is from Orange County Office of Education, is leading the model curriculum development on Cambodian genocide model curriculum, the Hmong history and cultural studies curriculum, and the Vietnamese American refugee experience. And Orange County has conducted lots of listening sessions and input sessions over the last year, and is now in the drafting period this summer of drafting that model curriculum on those three communities. Very interesting, very insightful, learning about these three communities. And then this fall, that draft curriculum will come back to the committees for feedback, and then finalizing in the spring of 2024. The other model curriculum is being developed by Humboldt County Office of Ed and San Diego County Office of Ed on American Indian curriculum. That's taking a little more time to bake and over the next 2 years, and lots of listening sessions there conducted by Humboldt County and San Diego, and then developing new curriculum, grabbing a hold of existing curriculum, and lots of listening sessions there. Again, that'll take 2 years on that. The other report is on the career technical education. We have a new statewide plan on career technical education. That's a report from the Joint Pathways Committee that I also sit on. And that statewide plan will be rolling out now over the next few months, and I urge you to take a look at that. Thank you.
Exciting progress being made. Thank you. And I've said plenty in this meeting. I will simply just add to all the work that we've already discussed that in the accountability domain, which I am a co-liaison for, we've begun to think about also the continuous instruction approach that we started to take at the beginning of the pandemic, asking districts to be able to have a plan for how they can move in and out of instruction. We didn't really talk about that yesterday, but that's another piece of the puzzle that is really not about accountability or dashboard. It's about how do we deal with the, changes in climate and so on. Back in the beginning of the pandemic, the place that appeared as the most interesting in that regard was Miami, because they had the beginnings of floods every year. So they had a plan for every school that students would have laptops, they would have all of the assignments and everything up on the dashboard, the chalkboard, or whatever it is that they were using for online instruction, and could flexibly be in and out of school. And as we were talking about the ways in which we want to support attendance, part of it is going to be beyond our dashboard or indicator system, but really into the way we help support schools to be able to do that. So interesting conversations are going on about that, not only here, but across the country, and we'll have a chance to talk more about that in future. And now I'd like to take up agenda item 16, general public comment. Public comment is invited on any matter not included on the printed agenda. Are there any speakers signed up to provide public comment in person?
Yes, Steve McDougall.
Oh. Nice to see you again.
There we go. I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the board, CD staff. Steve McDougall with the California Federation of Teachers. We are 2 weeks away from some of our schools opening up, 5 weeks away from all of them being open probably. And it'll be our first full year of AI being on students and staff's brains. We really need to have some guidance out there for LEAs on what to do about it and what not to do about it. Certainly with our academic honesty policies need to be some guidance on that updated, but I urge you, if you're not already working on that maybe we need to get going on that. And if you have been working on it and I just missed it, I apologize for being redundant. So other than that, I'd like you all to adjourn if you can. So
thank you very much, Steve, both for that knotty problem and for that good advice. Is there anyone waiting to provide public comment on the phone line?
There is not.
All right. So there are no further callers, and I hereby can adjourn our July 2023 meeting at 11:52 a.m. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in September. Yay!